Locho sampo pagyo trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngoda belge drolor zambe tse parche pande lame shabla solwade Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Utta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma Guru Vajra Sumati Munisha Sanekar Utta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Utta Vardani Shri Bad Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma A Guru Vajradara Utta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Utta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Utta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma Guru Vajra Nisha Sane Karm Utta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma A Guru Vajra Dara Sumati Munisha Sane Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Dhagi Chetsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Siksu So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendo So Uyon Sunge Nawa Tsedo So Seji Ningne Solwa Debetse Dejen Korlo Visu Lekshune Ila Sambe Dedem Malupa Gemel Hunge Drubra Chingelo Soni Sodan Diktunsh Dinginam Geyin Su Lekshune Labchen Soni Yonsu Zopata Cherani Dun Chamra Chingelo Chancho Pargi Ninsen Tukun Tu New Peme Siudru Lekshune Chanchu Drube Gegen Kunshishi Tungen Dela Drubra Chingelo Dagelo Na Chola Chokba Dan Chemin Samjur Ngemba Shiwa Dan Chedan Tumbe Dodem Malupa Bemel Hungi Drubra Chingelo Dorna Tingne Tsera Tamche Dan Techi Pardu Ne Kaba Tamche Tu Rese Kyamne Lama Keleme Tukche Chingi Dala Siksu Sol Gongyab Drewe Nyamta Dachala Chetsun Lame Tuje Rab Gongne Kudan Sungi Nawa Dralme Tu Nyam Sunyongwe Kesan Toprasho Kewa Kuntu Yanda Lama Dan Rame Cheki Pela Long Sada Lamgi Yunte Rabzone Dorje Changi Kopa Nyurtob Sho Pakyuke Kudan Dagi Alu Pakyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Pakyuke Tudan Dagi Yi Ten Yerme Chiktu Chingi Alu Makyuke Kudan Dagi Alu Makyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Makyuke Tudan Dagi Yi Ten Yerme Chiktu Chingi Alu Om Muni Muni Maha Shakyamuni Swaha. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha. Sashipu ki choshimeto Tramare Ravalingashin Nidegempadi Sange Shinto Mikte Ulwarki Rokununam Dashinglan Chopar Shoyidam Guru Ratna Mindrala Kam Niryatayami. Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparasho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparasho Sangye Chodan Tsoge Chonam La Jancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparasho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Namo alhaye ke da ludan we jinke rubuda mi kenam dan roba kunge tranam chitsampa tamche ke to dagi chuten. Buongiorno.
Good morning.
Nel percorso di questa vita
Along the path of this life,
sono giornate
there are days that are sunny,
dove le cose
where things are clear, mind is serene.
Ogni tanto ci sono giornate
And sometimes there are foggy days where we don't have a lot of clarity about things. Or unfortunately, there are also times where there are fires. And there we need to go and put out the fire. And unfortunately, damage is done through these fires. And in our lifetime, on the sunny days, it's very important. During the sunny days, it's important to maintain the clarity of our direction. Because when these dark days, these foggy days, or days when there's a storm or a fire, at that point, it won't be easy to maintain our direction. Our tendency when we find ourselves when we're faced with a difficult situation, what we call difficult, our tendency is to react. And these difficult situations are also called, in a way, sometimes we use the term interference. And it's an interesting term because an interference in Italian, in Tibetan, it's parchen. It's something that blocks, that cuts, blocks one thing to another. If I'm cooking, for example, and at a certain point, someone comes and asks something, and it doesn't allow me to cook anymore, what happened was an interference to the realization of my lunch. Maybe it was something really beautiful. Maybe someone came to tell me something wonderful that happened, or maybe it was a pleasurable experience, or maybe I'm making lunch and I see a friend that I hadn't seen in a long time, and we end up spending our time talking about all the past missed time. So it was a wonderful time, but lunch didn't happen, so that becomes an interference to what I was doing. But it's not necessarily negative. There are secret interferences too. Things that manifest as positive and virtuous and pleasurable, and they can be, if we look at them specifically, but they actually interfere, they block something that has a greater importance. But what is our main objective? It's not making lunch. Yeah, we need also that, but beyond that, our main objective is obtain inner peace and maintain wholesome principles and cultivate a deep feeling of love towards ourselves, abandon what's bad for us, cultivate what's good for us, allow ourselves to see others and love others, cultivate this real peace. And it's relatively easy to do this when it's a sunny day. When everyone's nice and kind with us, when things go the way we expect, when our body is well, when things go well and there's a nice sunny day, it's easy, more or less. It's quote unquote. I say it's relatively easy because maybe the day is so sunny that we get lost and we forget our direction. But a fundamental aspect of interference, as an interference should be overcome and not followed. So let me give you an example. For example, it happens to me often, unfortunately, not very often, but sometimes. Coming back from Milan on Wednesday, it's quite late, and at a certain point, the highway is blocked, and you need to add a half an hour to the trip because you have to go along the lake. So I'm on the road. There's an interference. the road that the road is blocked, the one I would normally take. So what do I do? Do I argue with those who have shut down the road? You know, actually, in this zone, if anybody can understand and explain to me what they actually do, what they're actually doing in the tunnels along the highway, there's like mysteries of the world, and this is one of them. So you can explain it to me. But action. So I could stop the car and, just argue with the workers. I could even turn back. I can say I can't go forward because the road is blocked. That's an interference. Once I see it as an interference, that doesn't allow me to follow the road that I had set forth. What do? I say, how can I overcome this interference? I keep that direction, but I take a detour. When we don't see the interference as an interference, as an absolute block, and sometimes it happens when we're going in a certain direction, an interference appears. So instead of seeing it as an interference, we lose sight of our objective, and then that thing becomes the objective, and we go towards that. I mean, very often losing sight of our objective. If my objective is to cultivate inner peace, and at a certain point, someone comes and acts with aggression towards me, can happen, right? In all of our lives. What are the probabilities that I forget about my inner peace and I simply react to what I have in front of me? In that case, what's happening is there's an interference. Instead of facing it and eliminating that interference, what do? To eliminate the interference requires that we maintain our direction. So instead, I can forget where I'm going and give more importance to that problem. A little bit like when Shantideva in the Bodhisattva Charavattara asks us, what's more important for you, your inner peace or what other people think about you? What's our rhetorical answer? A little bit fake. Inner peace. And in front of that, Shantideva then asks us, well then, how is it that you lose your inner peace when someone talks badly about you? Because if my inner peace is more important than what other people think about me, someone who talks badly about me, what? I mean, I'm not going to lose my inner peace over that. But let's remember that we will find, along our lifetime, we will find various obstacles, various interferences that to block our main objective. And it's fundamental that we need to maintain certain fundamental principles like the truth. And someone might ask, well, how can you have a value, a principle of truth when reality is relative? Okay, yes, we live in a relative reality, but that doesn't mean that anything can be true. I can say that this is a singing bowl, it's a bowl, it's a vase to use to urinate during the night. But if I say that it's a cake, no matter how much I believe that it's a nut cake, it cannot sustain those functions. There's something that we do. We we give a lot of importance to our feelings. So So when we feel frustrated or when we have contradictions or inner fears, just feelings that move us, envy, what we try to do is we try to create a kind of storyline outside to find some kind of corresponding storyline. So we ask, okay, why do I feel like this? And somehow we look for a justification. We need to give ourselves an explanation. And unfortunately, you see very often that when a storyline is incoherent and one knows that it's not it's not true, it's absurd. Once it's repeated again and again, then it's lived as if it were real, as if it were true. So a fundamental principle, in my opinion, is the truth, understood as a total sincerity and coherence with oneself. Because it's important for us to be able to observe and say, if I see that thing like this, but I don't agree, I don't like it, many things, but we allow ourselves to be coherent with ourselves. It's very, very important because we're very good at creating justifications, and this search for justifications leads us to lose our way. And our way, what is it? Cultivating inner peace. Really loving ourselves, recognizing what can actually uphold happiness and peace and well-being. And we need to maintain coherence with the truth. We live in a time where even our storyline for politics, so there we see that truth is not important. Or I'm wrong. I would like to be wrong. But what appears to me is that, what's important is how to manipulate information to obtain what they want. And then, if in front of you, I say that this is a nut cake, but I repeat it 1,000 times as if it were, and then at some point someone believes it, okay, then I was able to sell it as such. So something that's important for us is to maintain coherence with our principles, with our values. And Buddha Shakyamuni brought us, when we talk about what's good and what's harmful, what's beneficial, what's harmful, he said clearly that the lack of respect for life is harmful when we don't give value to the life of someone else or of our own. So, and he created a precept, advice. He said, it is not good for you to kill. It would be better for you to not kill. But not just don't kill, but don't rejoice. Don't rejoice for those who kill, and don't convince others to kill. When I read the news and I see where the death becomes so banal, it's really frightening. And he says also, try not to speak untruths. Don't lie, because a lie is harmful for ourselves. It's harmful to relationships. It really corrupts them from within. How beautiful being able to tell the truth even when a lie is more convenient. And so here's another point. Even if the world around us is strongly going into the direction of doesn't matter, we're more and more polarized. Our views are more polarized and losing something marvelous called dialogue. We saw here in Italy something that touched the lives of so many people. The lack of dialogue during the period of vaccinations during COVID, or not. I saw so many views that were, completely polarized. Now it's not the right context now to open up this conversation, but we got into a dynamic where I'm right, you're wrong, and the other says I'm right, you're wrong, and there was no space to dialogue, to converse, because the dialogue requires at the basis an openness to change a point of view. The dialogue requires at its basis respect towards others. And when we talk about not lying, has to also do with this commitment with coherence, with truth, which is something fundamental in my opinion. And then there's the vow. Buddha also talked about the vow to respect the rules of our society. What belongs to one belongs to another, taking the commitment to not take what has not been given to us, so to not steal. And this is a delicate point for some that has to do with taxes. Someone says, I'm not taking something that has not been given to me. I'm not giving what they think I should be giving. I don't know. Here's a whole conversation. We can have a dialogue about this too. I think we live in a time where there are agreements, and we need to respect these agreements. But again, we could open up a debate about this, which would be wonderful. But it's important to not take what has not been given to us and give respect for others. There's the vow of keeping a correct sexual conduct. And I can see it in two different ways. When between two people there's a commitment, we need to respect that commitment. So beyond a wedding or not, it's not about the formality. It's a question about, okay, there's a commitment. When that commitment is broken, we say that there has been betrayal. So when you don't respect a commitment, that would be a form of sexual misconduct. But it goes deeper, this vow, this fact of... So sexual misconduct is when someone doesn't take into consideration the needs and the desires of the other person and lives that sexual relationship with that person as a mere means to obtain one's pleasures. I don't know if that's clear. You could also translate it as abuse. It goes beyond being within, being part of a commitment or being in a marriage. In any commitment between two people, there needs to be this respect for the desires and needs of that person. Imagine our world. If most people, I don't mean necessarily everyone, but the great majority of people had a deep respect towards life, towards truth, towards what belongs to one and the other, had a positive sexual conduct, and gave value, as the last one, gave value to the clarity of one's mind, and avoided the use of substances that take away the clarity of our mind. I'm sure that if there was a lot less use and abuse of substances like alcohol and drugs, our society would be much more peaceful, because when one drinks or takes some drugs, one loses that self-protection. So, and what's inside that can be, that normally would be contained somehow, it all comes out, and we can have do a lot of damage. There was a Lama, a Nyingmapa, that I knew. He, for example, in certain contexts with the disciples, he would drink like a half a bottle of whiskey. He would get really drunk. And I was never in his presence, but his disciples say in those moments he gave marvelous teachings, because inside him he was, take away those filters, what was inside was absolutely beautiful. And so he would teach without filters, and then they would have to carry him home. But this is, in that context, in that tradition, is seen also as a deep act of intimacy and love towards his disciples, because he allowed himself to be naked, let's say, in front of his disciples. But let's tell the truth. Most of us, if we take away those controls, what actually comes out? We say what we shouldn't say. We do what we shouldn't do. Just to say that when we talk about these aspects of the renunciation, this definite emergence, when we abandon what's bad for us, what's harmful, and cultivate what's good for us, this has to do with we should look at our conduct. What is good for me? What is bad for me? What's beneficial? What's harmful? And the importance of giving ourselves a direction, because on sunny days but it is one thing, but on days when there's a storm or fog, it's important for us to have a direction, a direction that we're sure of, that we're sure to not lose. It's easy to say, oh no, I'm not someone who tells lies, until you're in a situation where you need to tell a lie. It's easy to say, I'm not aggressive, until I don't find myself in a condition where there's this need, or this feeling of needing to react with aggression. So these difficult situations are called interferences, situations that take us away from our direction, our path. And it's there where we absolutely need to remember our objective and face interferences without nourishing them, without following them. Let me give you another practical example that I think touches everybody's lives. We're not solitary beings, so we live in a herd, let's say. We need others. We need to interact with our parents with children, or within a couple, with friends, with our work mates. But if I have a relationship with someone, and my objective is to have a relationship based on affection and respect, seeing each other, love, truth, at a certain point it can happen that maybe someone is aggressive. At some point that person becomes aggressive with us. It's an interference for that path. But if I see it as an interference, What's my objective? Okay, my objective is to have a relationship based on love and respect. So if it's my choice to respect that person, if that person, you know, I can't, I'm not in charge of what that other person does, and I take the commitment, I can choose to not be aggressive towards that person. Maybe I need to take my mala and breathe and recite 100 mantras, but I maintain my vow. Getting back to the text of Lama Tsong Khapa, he says, freedom and endowments are difficult to find and life is short. By gaining familiarity with this, attraction to the appearances of life is eliminated. One of the first steps is to review our priorities. Here too, there are sunny days where we really have a lot of clarity. And then this happens, that happens. It's just really crazy. There's just that moment where one it feels like they want to reach enlightenment, and then one person shows up. There's enough for one person to show up and starts to tell us, it says 3 bad words, or even one is enough, or he starts blaming us for something that, in our opinion, we haven't done, or we don't want. Maybe we've done it, but we don't want it to be known. I mean, where did our inner peace go? Where did our objective to reach enlightenment go? It went. It really lost importance. Here's why it said familiar. Here it says, by gaining familiarity with this, we need to repeat this again and again and again until it becomes a deep part of our being. It's not enough to say it 3 times. We need to say it again and again and again, so it becomes part of ourselves. I have a precious life. I have unique conditions, and this is no joke. We are free from so many disastrous situations, and unfortunately this world is full of those. We have marvelous conditions on so many levels. Wow. But I don't know why, but sometimes I have this sensation, of this feeling that in front of something marvelous, when we recognize just one thing that doesn't go well, we just fixate on that thing, in spite of all the other marvelous things. So this is why it's also important for us to verbalize, oh, how beautiful that I have this, how wonderful that I have this. Look at what a beautiful situation that I'm finding myself in. Imagine if I didn't have this, or I was in this, that other situation, just to say anything. Even proverbs that are said here, I don't know exactly how it is, but when do you give value to something? When you lose it. Once, years ago, in a very particular moment of my life, very, very particular, I twisted my ankle in front of the house in Albagnano, and it lasted for like 8 months. It was really difficult, and that day I couldn't stop. It was terribly painful. And I remember after, when I was totally healed, I remember saying, oh, how beautiful it is to walk without pain. Before, I just took for granted. And I think that now I've actually gone back to taking for granted what that means, but it's not obvious. Or when I had that diagnosis of this, I had this diagnosis of sickness in my eyes. Now it's stopped. It's stable, and I check it every year, so there's nothing to worry about. But at first, when I had this diagnosis of keratocome, I saw that my auntie, who left her body this year, she had she had this, and she need to have the cornea transplants several times. And I thought, wow, how marvelous how marvelous it is to see. That's not, shouldn't take it for granted, or having a good memory. Shouldn't take that for granted. Living in a context where our survival is of no worry. It's not to be taken for granted. Being able to be heated in the winter. Just look at the generation of our grandparents. How was winter for them? It was cold. So what happens is we allow ourselves to rejoice for things and not take what we have for granted. That it's important to repeat that again and again. And the more I can repeat it, the more joy I can feel. And at the same time that I generate joy, I see that I have this unique opportunity that I should not waste, because life is not long. We're here, and soon we won't be here. We won't be here as we are now. We'll be in another form. This is not just about the actually dying. Giving a kind of maybe tragic example. A friend of our Brazilian Sangha, and she was about 50. Her life at this point was finally going well. She had a nice partner. She had her work was going well. She had worked so hard, had children who had given her a lot of trouble. And when she was at this point of her life where things were really well, and then she had a stroke, and then she lived for another 20 years of where she maybe understood like a tenth of what was happening. She left her body this year. What I mean to say is we have the conditions that are marvelous. We don't know what tomorrow will be. Maybe our economic situation will change. Maybe our health will change. Maybe what's worrying us today will be nothing. And I don't want to make anybody scared. But let's use the opportunities that we have. Let's use them well. And this is what Lama Tsong Khapa is reminding us. And he says, it's not about, problems in Italy in 2026. It was like this in Tibet and in the 14th century and even before. Our tendency is to take for granted life and be distracted and let it just all go by. So by familiarizing ourselves with the beautiful circumstances that we have, marvelous, and being realistic, marvelous things will happen and difficult things will have. And these conditions, we don't know how long they will last. So we shouldn't live with paranoid. We shouldn't live paranoid, but we should use these conditions well. There was a master. He was the master of Lama Michel Rinpoche. Geshe Wanchuk was his name, and during one of his teachings, he gave this example, talking about this. He said, just imagine that someone comes and they lend you a machine that prints money, totally legal. And you have a machine, a kind of printer that prints money, but we're lending it to you, and you'll have to give it back at some point, but we don't know when. What bill would we choose? 5 bills of 5, bills of 10, 100, at least 100. Let's bills of 50 or higher. And where will we put this printer? Down in our cellar? Because I can't do it now. I don't have time. It's a nice thing. It's a nice thing, but now I can't. I have lots of things I have to do. Or do we put it in the middle of the living room? Or next to a kitchen, next to the bathroom, so we can get to it 24/7, because we don't know when they're going to come for it. And when they ask for it, we need to give it back right away. So we don't know if it'll be a day or a month or a year. What are we going to do? We're going to use that machine. Geshe Yeshe Wancho could say this life is lent to us. And the day the Lord of Death comes, he says, it's time to give it back. There's not, okay, maybe, just wait a little bit. No. When that moment comes, that's it. And it's not like, oh, I wish I had done that and I haven't done. No. So it's say we need to use these opportunities that we have, these conditions that we have. They're worth more than all the money of the world, because developing a state of more balance, satisfaction, joy, being able to face our own inner wounds, little by little, face our anger, our shadows, our jealousy, and become gradually a better person, a healthier person, just at peace with oneself and with the world. That's the most beautiful thing that we can do. And this opportunity is there. There's a lot. There's a lot of hard work to do. It's tiresome, but it's tiresome because it means going against our habits, going against the current. But it brings marvelous results. And so here Lama Tsong Khapa reminds us, let's remember that we have a marvelous, unique opportunity, and at a certain point it will end, so we need to use it now. And then he says, attraction to the appearances of this life is eliminated. By thinking over and over again that actions and their effects are unfailing, karma, and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of this cyclic existence, attracting the appearances of this future life is limited. So that what we do doesn't end there. Let me give you an example. Today, we are still living the results of things that happened during our adolescence or childhood, things that we lived that have marked us and that mark us still, right? For all of us, this is true. If it weren't like this, I think that most therapists and psychologists would be out of a job, because we're there, because that time when this happened to me or when that happened to me, we're still living that. It's a simple example of cause and result. I do an action. That action doesn't end there. It generates a kind of inertia, a karmic force that I bring with me, and at a certain point it transforms into something else. This is valid for all of us. To understand karma better, it's one of those words that we don't even need to use the Sanskrit word. We could maintain the translation, which just means action. It's the law of action. It literally means action. So, so we have cause and result. So action is a cause and result. So to see it well, I mean, as it was explained to me, we can look at the example of our DNA, because our DNA has a lot of information that we bring with us from birth. These genes are not determining. It's not a determining reality. It's a reality that gives a probability. So our DNA is all raveled up, and then depending on the condition with the environment, this epigenetics, there are two types of environments. So external relation with our the world around us and our internal world, our own emotions, our thoughts, etc. So when our genes come into contact with the environment, it opens up, it unravels, the genes come out and and something manifests. But there's certain aspects of our DNA that will come out and other aspects that will not manifest. So there are very nice, interesting studies. They seemed nice to me when I was reading them. For example, identical twins, but that were raised in very different contexts. And they have certain aspects that are identical and many others that are completely different. But when they did this research, they saw that they had the same predispositions, but what happened was, according to the environment, one gene came out instead of another. And so this is the importance. We can talk about the importance of education and the experiences one has. When we talk about karma in Buddhist teachings, it's said that when we are born and along our life we reinforce, we bring with us this karmic force, this imprints of previous actions. By actions, not just specific things that I've done, but these really deep habits that we bring with us. Someone who lies a lot will be reborn with the predisposition for lies. Someone who meditates a lot will be born with the predisposition to meditate a lot. So one is reborn with a predisposition for arrogance, for love, for anger. And what happens is we're born with these predispositions, and along our lifetime, according to the interactions that we have, we access one predisposition, one imprint or another to make it manifest and come out. So even if I'm able to have a good rebirth, the predispositions are coming with me. What I did in this and other lives, these are the positions that I have in my life that I keep reinforcing. At a certain point, all this comes out. So having a good rebirth is nice, but it's not enough. It says, when we talk about the sufferings of suffering, we're talking about the three sufferings: the suffering of suffering, the suffering of change, and the permeating suffering. So suffering of suffering, in just a few words, is what we call suffering: physical and mental suffering. The suffering of change makes reference to all those things that we project our happiness on, but when that contact is maintained, sooner or later it transforms into suffering. The example that I've given many times is a caress. Someone that we love and comes and starts, caressing us. Yeah, we like it. I imagine we all like it. What happens if that caress just goes on with that same intensity, same way, half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour, goes on and on? At a certain point, that pleasure that we felt at the beginning, does it increase? Does it maintain, or does it little by little diminish? And not only diminish, but sooner it actually transforms into suffering. I drink water that I like. It's good for me, and I like it. But if I keep drinking water, after 3 glasses, after 2 liters of water, what was at the beginning, what was relief becomes torture. Once I was doing this strange treatment called the panchakarma, where you clean the intestines. You need to drink more. You need to drink more water than your body can hold. And it seemed like a room for torture, a torture room. But anyway, there are many, many things that on first contact it's pleasurable, but if that contact is maintained, then these things become suffering. These are called, these are the sufferings that change, or the suffering of change. They are not suffering, but they are of the nature of suffering. And then we have the third type, which is called the all-permeating suffering. The all-permeating suffering, without talking, without going on too long about it, it's just there's nowhere to run. Someone says, "Oh, Lama, I want to take vacation from myself." I have no means to help you. I mean, there are those who try. There are those who try to run away from themselves with alcohol and drugs, to try to not come into contact with themselves. This is something that happens, and how. But the truth is that you go round and round, but in the end, who are you with? I find myself with myself. And wherever I go, whatever I live it through this filter of self. So the all-permeating suffering, in technical terms, is the body and mind that are polluted by mental defilements and karma. And as long as we have selfishness and resentment, dissatisfaction, anger, hatred, and this inertia of the non-virtuous actions of the past, sooner or later this suffering will manifest. So just reflecting on this, one says, okay, it's not enough to have a good rebirth. I want to totally get out of this cycle. Let's remember that getting out of this cycle of samsara, this cyclic existence, doesn't make reference to going to a different place. I've already mentioned what would happen if at a certain point we want to be reborn in a kind of heaven. So because there finally we can be well. First of all, what if happens if I'm reborn in heaven, but I'm still envious? I'm going to find someone who has something better than me, I imagine. Or, I don't know. All of Milan, all of Milan is reborn in heaven. What happens to that heaven? Becomes Milanese. No, nothing against the Milanese, but does it stay as a heaven? I mean, are all people's, they're going to bring their problems there. And there is a term in Buddhism. I mean, certain traditions talk about a kind of paradise, a heaven, but in our tradition, we talk about pure lands, but pure lands talk about a context where not everything is perfect, but the majority of those beings are balanced beings. So imagine we leave our house and we go to the bar. We have the coffee shop. We have a cappuccino, and the person who serves us is a loving, balanced person. We take a taxi, and the taxi driver is like Lama Ganchen, a beautiful energy, smiling. We need to go to City Hall to make a document, and the person who helps us there is a loving, balanced person. This would be a pure land. It's not a place where everything is perfect. It makes reference to a place where the conditions of the people who live there are mostly, these are beings that are at peace with themselves and with others. Because this world, when we look at our planet, if we look at the natural resources and conditions we have from this planet, I don't like the name, the word resources, but there's everything necessary for this planet to be a heaven. We're not lacking anything. The problem is not about what the planet is offering to us. It's how we are relating to all of that. So what happens is, when we think, okay, to getting out of samsara, it's not about leaving this planet and say, oh, finally I'm getting out of here. And then what happens? I go somewhere else and I bring my problems there. So the fundamental point here is, I want to get out of this inner cycle of mental defilement, selfishness, anger, hatred, resentment, attachment, the actions that are harmful, the so-called negative actions, and the results of sufferings to which I react with other negative defilements. This is called samsara. So when we talk about this love towards ourselves, this determination to emerge, the so-called renunciation, I'm renouncing to suffering and the cause of resting and the causes of suffering. But what do I really want? I want to be well with myself and be well with others, no matter where I am, no matter with whom I am, and no matter what situation I find myself. And I want to get out completely from samsara. If having, here it says, when having trained in that way, the conditions that we have, the certainty of death, the certainty of samsara and causes. Here, when it says when having trained, or could say when having meditated in that way, we're talking about creating familiarity. The word gom in Tibetan is often translated as meditated, but the more correct translation would be familiarized. So by having familiarized ourselves in that way. So I'm no longer projecting my happiness onto things that can't sustain that happiness. Here in another text, Lama Tsong Khapa says, I'm trying to contextualize it a little bit. He says, it's like when one doesn't have any more attachment to food, but he looks for it when he looks for food when he's hungry. It means I don't project my happiness onto food, but I take care of my needs. My body has physical needs. I need to eat, but I don't project my happiness onto that. Okay, I know it's difficult to talk about food, but every country is different. But what happens, I don't know if this example is clear. It's not because I don't have attachment to food that I don't look for food when I'm hungry. Having attachment means that I grasp to it and I don't let it go. And when I don't have it, I suffer and I can think only about that, and I'll do whatever I can. I can do whatever I can to get it. I'm at lunch and I talk about what you're going to have for dinner. I don't know if this has ever happened to you. Once I was with my mother, and she was married to an Italian man before, a man named Stefano, he's left his body. He was from Trento, and we were in Trento together. And at a certain point, my mother joked. She said, "Here, they talk only about food. Let's try. Let's see how long they can stay without talking about food." So we were at dinner, and she said, I learned to make soup like this. And then they stayed for 45 minutes about food. Actually, she said, let's make a trial. Let's see how long they can spend talking about food. So anyway, attachment shows up when one is there, when one wants something, imagines that thing, and there's that real grasping. That deep desire, that craving. It's craving. I need to have it. That's attachment and desire. Something else is, I'm hungry, I need to eat, and I'm going to eat what's there. I try to eat what's good for me, and if you like it, then better yet. If not, no problem. So when it says the thought of renunciation, when by having trained in that way, there's no arising, not even for a second, of attraction of the essences of this cyclic existence. So, okay, so I have my priority of my life are not these aspects of, good food or good relationships, which are nice too, but that's not my objective. Here it is written, and day and night the intention seeking liberation arises. This desire, this passion towards a state of harmony towards ourselves, a state of harmony for ourselves and towards others. So when one is in this place where it's no longer, one is able to break this incessant grasping and desire and search for things that can't sustain happiness, and at the same time deeply, deeply wants to get out of samsara, reach a real state of inner peace. When one has this inner state, at that point, the so-called renunciation, this definite emergence, has been reached, generated. Is that clear? Even if renunciation has been developed, if one hasn't generated pure bodhicitta, it will not become the cause of the perfect joy of unsurpassed enlightenment. Therefore, the wise generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. Here, there's a fundamental point, and we're getting into the second point of the path, which is loving others. Here's a very direct question. Are you selfish or not? Someone said no. Okay, good. But actually, if we look a little bit more clearly, what's our priority? Is it when we need to judge something, what's our reference point? I and the my or common good? It's the I and the my. So we are selfish. So how can I become altruistic being selfish? There's only one way. By using selfishness to become altruistic. I can't eliminate selfishness to create altruism. It's just not possible, because the only means that I have to do it is selfishness itself. Let me explain myself better. In this selfish state, we're strongly self-referential.
Good morning.
It's Lama Caroline who's arrived. Good morning. We're deeply self-referential. Let me give you an example. For example, we go to the hospital to take a test. We were diagnosed with a certain sickness, and at a certain point we meet someone in the waiting room of that doctor who, and talking, we see that we have the same diagnosis, the same sickness. We generate a little bit of empathy towards that person. We can connect a little bit with that person. Why? Because we see ourselves in the other person. Like a child, and I know when she was about 2 years old, she went to a doctor. She had a sore throat or something like this. And she came out in the room. There was another child, like 2, 3 years old. It was crying. And since as a child, she would go and talk to everyone. She went to this other child and said, "Don't cry, don't cry. Don't worry. The doctor's really nice. He's really good." This act of empathy. We're made like this. So this child a little bit better than the most of us, but our tendency, we're able to see others when we see ourselves in others, in that other person. What happens when we see someone, someone, we meet someone who likes the same things we like. There's a certain amount of attraction. We're on the same team. We root for the same team. Oh, look, he has a mala. He's Buddhist like me. That likes the same things. I mean, we can give 1,000 examples, but what happens is we generate empathy. Empathy brings a feeling of liking, and then empathy, liking to love, and love and compassion to altruism, love and compassion to altruism. This is the path, but at the basis of empathy is I see myself in you. Because I am totally centered on myself. I am completely self-referential. So there are two reasons at the basis to open up ourselves to others. There are two ways to help us to go from a selfish attitude where we're obsessed with the I and the my, to evolve to a state where we take care of the I and the my, but we also include others. The fundamental difference here between selfishness and altruism is that selfishness is where I want to be happy and I don't want to suffer. And that's completely directed towards myself. I don't want to suffer. I want to be happy. And I don't really care about anything else. Someone already said to me, I'm not selfish because the happiness of my children is more important than me. Yeah, and I say, well, your children. Let's remember that the my is an extension of the I. They're your children. So what happens is selfishness is we direct this attraction to happiness and an aversion to suffering. It's directed towards the I and the my. Altruism is this identical strength of attraction to happiness and aversion to suffering that it doesn't go away. We don't move it away from ourselves, but it includes others. To understand it easily, altruism is this attitude where if we were to give it a voice, altruism would say, your happiness is as important to me as my own. Your suffering is as important to me as my own. And so I do everything I can for you to be happy and not suffer. Your happiness is important to me as my own, is altruistic love. Your suffering is as important to me as my own, is the altruistic compassion. I'll do everything I can is so that you don't suffer, so you are happy. That's the act of altruism. Laksam is called in Tibetan. This is my theory, my way of understanding this. I say it like this, not to show off, but to warn you. I mean, it could be right or it could be wrong. I mean, things that have been seen and re-seen over the centuries are sure. But my own conclusions, I prefer to tell you that this is my way of understanding it. Altruism is nothing other than an evolution of selfishness. Altruism is a mature selfishness because it's the same force but directed to include others. And here, given that we are selfish, to get to altruism, there are two paths that are lived in parallel. One seems like a play on words, but says selfishly speaking, it's better to be altruistic, or rather, it's where we go and see that at the end of the day, what is harmful to me and harmful to others is being selfish. Tell me tell me when there was some kind of fight or conflict, or where selfishness hadn't that selfishness didn't have anything to do with it. From a micro to a from a micro to a macro level, it could be. You know, you can see, even wars, or you see mountains or castles, in something enormous. But if you take away that little point of selfishness, it all falls apart. All these conflicts, all these wars, you take away selfishness, and agreements can be found. So we just understanding that together we're much better off than being alone. I mean, opening up to dialogue. Uh, so selfishness is at the base of this, and selfishly speaking, it's better to be altruistic. If I love myself, and I love myself, it's better for me to not be obsessed with the I and the my, because the more I'm obsessed with the I and the my, the more I'll suffer. That's what I've seen, generally speaking. The more I've seen people who are able to include others and less obsessed with the I and the my, they've always been more joyous and balanced and happy. And other people that I've met with excellent material conditions, the more obsessed they were with the I and the my, the more suffering they had. So what happens is, selfishly speaking, really, selfishness is harmful to me. And this is a process that we need to reflect on little by little. The other aspect to develop altruism starts from the principle of selfishness, of seeing ourselves in others to generate empathy for others. So this first verse says, for yourself, it's better for you to be altruistic. And says, even if renunciation has not been developed, if one hasn't generated the pure bodhicitta, one thing is getting, it will not become the cause of the perfect joy of unsurpassed enlightenment. So one thing is getting out of samsara, another thing is Buddhahood. Buddhahood, when we talk about the path towards enlightenment, there are the 5 paths, the 10 bhumis, without getting into the details, but the time one needs along this path, you need 1/3 of the time to get out of samsara, and 2/3 of the time is said to reach enlightenment. But then the good news is, in those 2/3 of the time, there's no suffering because one has gotten out of samsara. They're two different things. I don't want to get into details on this subject now. We can, but not now. So what happens is, why would one want to become a Buddha? If I think for myself, and each one can think for himself, once that I don't suffer anymore, there's no envy or fear or anxiety or anger. There's no more suffering. Is that enough? Yes, it's great. So, but thinking about my needs, I just need to get out of samsara. Thinking about others' needs, what's most difficult in helping others is that I need to understand that person. I need to see reality through your eyes, because the only tool that I have to help you is interacting with you. And how can I show you the reality that I see if I don't speak your same language? I think we've all had this experience. We've tried to help someone and we've not been able, right? But why are we not able? Because that person doesn't want to be helped, or because we don't know how to help? We don't have the means to get there, how to speak that person's language and show our view of reality through their eyes. So the characteristic that's most important of a Buddha, the trait of a Buddha that would encourage us to become a Buddha is his ability to adapt to every being, to be able to guide everyone in the appropriate way. That's why we say, I want to become a Buddha. I want to have that ability. So even if renunciation has not been developed, if one hasn't generated pure bodhicitta, it will not become the cause of the perfect joy of unsurpassed enlightenment. The state of bodhi is translated in Italian. And it's a little bit of here's a little joke here, a little. So Lama Tsong Khapa is enticing us, calling them a Buddhahood the perfect joy. So he's saying, okay, there's no more suffering after getting out of samsara, but there's a level of joy and pleasure and happiness that comes with Buddhahood. So he says, if you want, he says, therefore, the wise generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. So it's this mind that is directed towards enlightenment, this bodhicitta.
Perciò
So
la bodhicitta, bodhi
is enlightenment and citta is mind.
è il profondo
This
desiderio
mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, this deep aspiration to develop one's qualities to their maximum potential, to help and sustain others, support others. The definition of bodhicitta in the text called the Labhisamaya Lankara, written by Asanga, taught by Buddha Maitreya, says, Semkhepa the generation of the mind is for the benefit of others. In the deep desire to develop one's characteristics, one's qualities to their maximum potential. So there are two aspirations, two aspects, one towards self and one towards others. I want to help all beings get out of suffering, and I take this responsibility on myself to do something. So I need to have these tools to help people. I think about a story that I read, and it touched me deeply. I was living in India, and I would read news through the weekly weekly magazines. I had a membership to Newsweek and Times magazine, two English magazines, and on both of them, one time, both of them had an article on this man and he did everything possible to become anonymous. But they talked. His name wasn't given, but they talked about this man who, at a certain point in his life, he decided he wanted to help others. And what he did is he opened up a company. 25 years go by, and this company was extremely profitable. No one in his family knew that he was the owner of this company, and they said that he they both on the articles said that he lived a very simple life, a very simple life. You know, he wore a $5 watch and traveled in in economy class. At a certain point, he sold the company, an enormous. It was really, really enormous amount of money. He sold it. He took zero money for him. He didn't give any money to his family, to his children. He made a foundation where, and in, he decided that all that money needed to be used, in the following 9 years to help people combat hunger and these kinds of things. I needed everything to be anonymous. And I saw this. I said, this is an act of a bodhisattva to say, I mean, why did he make that company? Because he wanted to help. He saw so much suffering, people who were hungry and suffering. How can I help them materially if I don't have money? So first of all, I need to generate. I need to make this money. So I create a company. I make money for that. So it's amazing that he was able to keep this purity of the purity of his resolve. You know, not even keeping, let's say, 20% of himself. I mean, his motivation. He was able to maintain that and keep it pure. So what happens is when we understand that the root of our suffering is not a material situation, but it's caused by ignorance, by hatred, by our selfishness, and how can I help others to not be selfish if I am? How can I help others to not be ignorant if I am? How can I help someone not be angry if I get angry? It's just not possible. So may I develop my qualities to their maximum potential, and as a consequence, may I overcome my mental defilements to help people do the same. This is the concept of bodhicitta. So in this first verse, Lama Tsong Khapa starts with from this principle. He's talking to us, saying, you know, this will be good for you. So selfishly speaking, it's better to be altruistic. And this is one fundamental point. On the other side, he starts with the part about empathy. This is one of the strongest points. So on one point, I recognize that selfishness is bad for me, and I allow myself to generate empathy for others. And here he says, let's try to imagine just a moment this image that he's giving us. Let me try to find something. Just
ok. Perciò.
So, samsaric beings. So who are the samsaric beings? Those who are taken by this cycle of mental defilements, actions, and the result of suffering. And they live within this cycle, and we find ourselves therein. So let's imagine these beings that are just swept away by a current. I don't know if it's ever happened to you that you've been swimming in the sea or in a river, and then you are just swept away by a current that's stronger than you. I mean, I've had this experience. It's this feeling of being swept away by the current is here I'm in a context where even my will is not strong enough. So we're swept away by the current of the four powerful rivers. At the same time, tied by chains, the chains of karma, tied by the tight bonds of karma, so difficult to undo. They have, they trapped in the iron net of self-grasping, rete. So they're trapped in the iron net of self-grasping, completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance. Not only are they swept away by this river, by this current, they're tied by chains in an iron net and in the total darkness since a time since forever. One could say, okay, just stay there, it's going to pass. No, endlessly reborn in cyclic existence, ceaselessly tormented. So endlessly born in this cyclic existence. So we don't know when it's going to end. And they are also, in their rebirth, they're ceaselessly tormented by the three sufferings. So one is attacked by, if we look in the Lam Rim, we see how they get attacked by other beings. So maybe you're feeling extreme pain, but then a little bit of relief. So thinking that all mothers are in such conditions generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. So let's see it again. So these samsaric beings we're talking about, they're swept away by the current of the four powerful rivers. What are these four powerful rivers? There's certain in different interpretations. Let's just see one possible version. We have the river of the past karmic fruition, ripening, like a sickness. As long as the sickness has not come out, we can avoid it. We can through preventative care. But once the sickness has come out, now I need to face it. Similarly, when we have created causes in the past, as long as those causes are dormant, they can be faced without living the result. But once they have ripened, then I need to actually take care of all that. When we talk about this current of this past actions that manifest in the present, means that none of us have is free from our past. We are totally conditioned by our past, the choices we made, the experience that we've lived. It's true. A little bit like, put yourself in their shoes. In Brazil, we also in English we say, wear someone else's shoe. It's easy to say that the shoes are uncomfortable or comfortable, but if our feet are a different size. No, I'd like to see what it would be like. How would I act? What it would be like to be you, with your experiences, your karmic forces of the past, your predispositions, your conditions. I mean, if I were you, would I act differently? Maybe a little bit different, because there is free will, but not that much. We are strongly conditioned by our past. We are conditioned strongly by our own desire. The strength, what I want. We're conditioned. There's a little dog. We're conditioned by our mental defilements, generally speaking, our so-called emotions. We're constantly taken by these, our own ignorance as well. So when we think a little bit at all of these forces that move us along in our lifetime, the level of the amount of freedom that we have is very small. Here now, I had written, there's a transcription when we had talked about the 4 rivers. One interpretation is there's the current of desire, so the current of we're taken by our desires, or taken by our world view. So desires, view, we're swept away by the attachment we have to life itself, and we're swept away by our own ignorance. This is one interpretation. I had written this down in the transcriptions of previous teachings. We're strongly conditioned by many factors. So let's add as well, we're swept away by the causes of the ripening of past causes. I mean, we're also swept away by this polluted filter of ourselves. So how much free will do we actually have? It's very, very small. A little bit like when we see someone who acts in a certain way, that person has very, very little little space to choose how to act. So, what happens? First of all, let's imagine ourselves. Let's try to observe in our own lives. If our choices are conditioned by our desires, by our worldview that we have, by the forces of our past actions that are ripening in this present moment, our own ignorance, we're conditioned, aren't we? Yes. We are tied by the tight bonds of karma. We're not free from our choices made in the past. All the actions that we have done in the past, they condition this present moment. We're not free from that. It's not easy. A little bit like someone who commits a terrible crime, 40 years go by, and at a certain point is condemned for that crime. Is that person responsible for what he or she did? Yes. Similar to that, we are responsible for what we've done. We're conditioned by the actions and the choices that we've made. This present moment is totally connected, tied to the past. So imagine these chains that bind us. We're bound to our past, which doesn't mean that we are condemned to stay like that, but that freedom of movement is minor. Luckily, that half a degree together over time, that makes a world of difference. But we are bound, let's say, it doesn't say that it's eliminate to undo, tied by the tight bonds of karma, so difficult to undo, not impossible to do, because that freedom of movement in this present moment is very little, because we're conditioned, we are tied, we are bound by our past actions and choices. We're trapped, we're enveloped in this iron net of self-grasping. So Daksen Chage Tawe Buksu Tsu. Daksen is a very particular word because dak means I, also means my, and also means like owner or own. Dak. Zin means to grasp. So this word daksin makes reference to the grasping at a self that exists in an autonomous, independent, and an objective way. A little bit like if I were to ask you, do you have a body? Yes, right? And do you have a mind? Yes. Who is this owner of that possesses this body and mind? Where is that self? I'm the one who owns my body and mind. Where is that I? There's a passage of the sutra where Buddha says a little sarcastically, it's the only time I've seen that he says, oh, my dear monk, you see that there's luggage and then there's also the porter. And meaning to say, there are the aggregates, the body and the mind, and then also the body and the mind. But it's actually ironic because we don't possess our body and mind. We are made up of body and mind. But can we exist independently of our body and mind? No. So, but we have this view, and we grasp at this view of the self that possesses a body and mind, and that exists in an independent space. And this is one of the strongest causes of our suffering, this grasping at an identity that exists in an autonomous way, independent, and that's what creates selfishness, attachment, anger, and fear. Let's do a quick analysis of this. We have three fundamental aspects: body, mind, and environment. Our and the environment is formed by the sensory objects, the air that I breathe, the objects that I see, what I hear, etc. There's nothing that can happen in the body that doesn't have a correspondence in the mind. There's nothing that happens in the mind that doesn't have something that corresponds in the body. So body and mind are two manifestations of the same. One does not exist without the other. Someone would ask me, and when someone dies? Okay, it says that there's a very subtle body and a very subtle mind that leave this gross body. So body and mind always go together. Now, let's give an example. And this example will be useful for what we'll see tomorrow. Can you hear the sound of the singing bowl? How does this sound come about? I have an intention. The intention has me move my arm. I take this little stick. I touch the singing bowl. The singing bowl generates a vibration. It moves in a certain way that vibration vibrates the air. That vibration in the air comes to each one of us at a certain frequency. And this vibration in the air comes to our hearing. It moves those small hairs. We have a part of our hearing consciousness that perceives the vibration in the air that comes to our actual sense faculty of hearing, and sends that and sends the message, there's a sound, and then we look at our database. Um, we have memories, but at the same time, we're also looking at the context of what we're seeing. So we connect that to a sound of a singing bowl, and we attribute a meaning. So what happens is once we hear the sound of the singing bowl, this sound appears to us as if it were objective, right? I play this singing bowl where we all hear the sound of the singing bowl. But the sound that each one hears, does it exist independently from our own mind that perceives that sound? In other words, the sound that I hear and the sound that each one of you hear, is it the same or is it different? The value that I attribute to it and the value you attribute, is it the same or different? It's different, and not because I'm a Lama, it's the same for all of us. So what happens is, my mind that perceives the sound of the singing bowl is together with the sound of the singing bowl, but the sound of the singing bowl doesn't exist independently from the mind that perceives the sound of the singing bowl. What I hear, let's remember, what I hear, it's not something external. It's a union of parts composed of the sensory object, the vibration in the air, number one, the sense faculty, my own hearing and sense consciousness, the part of the brain that perceives that sound, and discernment, this value that I attribute to that sound. Are we following? So the various parts that compose this, if any part is different, then the union is different. So let's say it would be possible that we all get the same vibration, which is not true. But what about the sense faculty of each one of us is different, and what about also the sense consciousness and the discernment? It's all different. If I take away these three parts, the sound doesn't exist anymore. So what happens? The sound of the singing bowl that I hear does not exist independently from my hearing consciousness that perceives the sound of the singing bowl. But my hearing consciousness that perceives the sound of the singing bowl, does it exist independently from the sound of the singing bowl? In other words, can I generate a hearing consciousness that hears the sound of the singing bowl without the actual sound of the singing bowl? Try to generate this. We can generate the memory of the sound of the singing bowl, but to actually generate the sense consciousness, the hearing consciousness of hearing the sound of the singing bowl actually requires that there be the contact of the singing bowl. So it means that externally there has to also be the contact with the inner characteristics. So the sound of the singing bowl and my hearing of the sound of the singing bowl, they are mutually dependent. And it's not like I always think of the image of E.T. I exist and you exist and we connect, we relate one to the other. No, it's not that. It's not I'm here and the sound is there. No, I exist because you exist. You exist because I exist. We are mutually dependent. Nagarjuna gives a very nice example on this. This will be actually our topic for tomorrow, but he says, someone who runs, what do we call a person who runs and there's a race about to start, they're all ready, all runners. So we have 8 runners. What makes a person a runner? So how can you be a runner? You run, but they're stopped. They're just waiting for the race to start. In other words, this act of running doesn't exist without a runner, but a runner doesn't exist without running. Which came first, the chicken or the egg, the runner or the running? There's no before and after. They're mutually dependent. Cause and result. One thing is a cause because there's a result. One is a result because before there was a cause. Father, mother, and a child. You're a child because you have parents. You're parents because you have children. Or a child. So we can go on that there's an infinite number of things that are mutually dependent, and so it is between this external reality, this environment that we live in, and this inner environment and mental environment that we live. So what happens is our being does not exist in an independent, autonomous way, and independent from everything that it perceives. This concept is not that easy to understand, but I don't exist as I am in this present moment because I'm made of body and mind and feeling and discernment, many aspects, and at the same time they don't exist independently from the objects of perception. What I see, what I hear, what I touch, the air that I breathe, the people that I meet. So we are interdependent. When it says that the beings are within this iron net of self-grasping, it's this grasping at a self that appears as being autonomous and independent and objective. But that I'm not able to see that I depend, I am mutually dependent on everything else. That takes me to have a view that is obsessed with the I and the my, the so-called selfishness. Tomorrow, we'll look at this more deeply, completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance. So trapped in the iron net of self-grasping. You've heard maybe in Buddhism we say that there's no self. That's wrong. If I didn't exist, I mean, who's talking, and what are you listening to? No, what doesn't exist, the self that appears to us, an autonomous, independent, objective being. No, an interdependent self exists. At the same time, these samsaric beings, they're completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance. Ignorance is there's ignorance of not seeing, and the ignorance of seeing erroneously. Not seeing is the ignorance of, in this present moment, we're not able to see what the causes of the past that have created the result, and we're not able to see what will be the results of what we're doing in this present moment. This is the ignorance of not seeing. At the same time, we live in a subjective reality, interdependent, relational, and that appears to us as being objective, autonomous, independent. So we don't see the reality as it is. And this is our topic for tomorrow, but we live within this ignorance. If we try to point the finger to say, where did it all begin? We can't find a beginning. And if we don't break this cycle, his tendency is that it's going to just keep going on forever. So we are constantly, ceaselessly tormented by the three sufferings, the suffering of change, and the all-permeating suffering. There are moments of relief, but then we fall again into suffering. Are we able to see ourselves in this? Now, let's have a very brief exercise to go right to the point. Let's imagine in front of us three people. Think about someone that you love very much. Are you able? Someone to whom you're indifferent. Basically, someone that you don't know, or just anyone. And then someone for whom you have a strong aversion, maybe someone you know well, or some kind of public or historical figure. It's strange that it's easy. It's easier to have a strong aversion towards someone like a political or a historical figure, someone we've never even met. So you have these three people in front of you. And now for a moment, look towards yourself and observe how we are swept away by the current of these powerful rivers, our attachments, our desires, our aversions, our karmic forces that are manifesting in the present. We're tightly bound by karma, strongly connected to our past and the choices we've made. We're within this iron net of self, seeing ourselves as being autonomous and interdependent, that brings about all the stress of the mental defilements. We don't see reality in a coherent way. We're in the total darkness of ignorance. We're not able to see where this began, and we don't see how it's going to end. We're constantly taken by these three sufferings. Suffering of mental and physical suffering, the suffering of change, and on the all-permeating suffering. I mean, we recognize our state like this. Now let's look at the person that we love. The person we love are they in the same situation as we are? Swept away by these four powerful rivers, the current of these four powerful rivers. Is this person tied by the tight bonds of karma, trapped in an iron net of self-grasping, enveloped by total darkness, ceaselessly tormented by the three sufferings? Yes. So this person is in the same situation as we are. What about the one to whom we're indifferent? There too, that person's in the same situation. And then if we look at the person for whom we have a strong aversion, even that person is taken also by these four powerful rivers, tightly bound by karma, trapped in this iron net of self-grasping, this grasping at an independent and objective self, completely enveloped by darkness of ignorance and tormented by these sufferings. Can we see this? That we apply it to all three people. This is the basis to generate empathy towards them. Because when I see that my problem really is my own samsara, when I'm able to recognize on a deeper level, where this suffering comes from, I see that in myself, that I'm able to see that also into others, and this is the basis of empathy towards others. We are in the same situation. Even that person that for us is the craziest in the world. I mean, we're all very different. There are many different aspects, but at the basis, We all have different traits, but there at the basis, we all share. We're afflicted by the same mal, the same negativities. And here there's a delicate aspect. Often we think that loving someone who acts in a way that we don't agree with means that we are approving of that behavior. But let's remember, one thing is one thing, and another thing is another thing. I can love you like crazy, but it doesn't mean that I agree with everything you do. And I have no problem saying what you're doing is wrong. I love you deeply, but this is terrible what you're doing. And here, I don't want to go too on about this, but it's very important that we should see the samsara of others until we get to the point where we see the samsara of people who act in an absolutely horrible way, and being able to see them with empathy, with kindness, being able to love them. Remember that if I love you, it doesn't mean that I agree with what you do. Even in our ignorance, that's what we do. When there's someone that we love and does something stupid, and that comes to the surface, what's our tendency? Our tendency, oh, I know it's true, but look in the situation he's in. And we try to justify. And when there's someone for whom we have aversion and does something positive, we say, oh, but you can't really trust, you know. Maybe there's something behind all that. You can't, we try to belittle the good thing that person has done. So for our own health and to have a healthy relationship with others, we should learn how to judge actions, the choices and thoughts, and not actually people. I have no problem to say this choice, this way of thinking, this way of behaving is wrong. I don't agree with this. I am against envy and jealousy and violence. I'm against many things. But this doesn't mean that I'm against the person who's doing those things. I'm against that action, not against that person. Because we're made up of so many things. And this doesn't mean that I'm not ready to stop somebody's actions. But one thing is stopping someone's actions. Another thing is wanting to hurt that person, going against that person. The enemy is not the other. The enemy is ignorance. It's our mental defilements, the anger and anger and hatred and resentment and jealousy. But to be able to do it with others, we need to be able to do it with ourselves. I shouldn't judge generalizing. I'm good. I'm bad. I'm like when I explain this to children, I use the following example. What makes a person a liar? Theoretically, they need to lie. How many times do you need to lie to become a liar? Just once? If one lie is enough to make someone a liar, then we're all liars. Or maybe you need to say one lie every 3 sentences. Maybe someone is a liar, someone's not. And what about if and for someone to be a sincere, truthful person, how often does a sincere person need to tell the truth? Always? Then there are no sincere people. So we can see there are no liars and there are no sincere, truthful people. There are people who sometimes tell lies and sometimes people tell the truth. We're made up of so many contradictions and so many aspects, traits. So starting from ourselves, we should not generalize ourselves. Oh, I am this or I am that. No, I have this habit. I have this view. I have this tendency to act in this way, but I am not this or that or the other. And the same for others, not judging others. This takes us to a much healthier place. And there's a basis there to find a meeting point with others. Because when I judge actions, my aversion is towards the action. Instead, if I'm judging the person, my aversion goes towards the person. So here we see these samsaric beings, they're swept away by the current of four powerful rivers, tied by the tight bonds of karma, so difficult to undo, trapped in the iron net of self-grasping, completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance, endlessly reborn in cyclic existence, ceaselessly tormented by the three sufferings, thinking that all mothers are in such conditions, generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. Why mothers? Why does it think that all mothers? Here, there's a fundamental point for the development of altruism, and that's gratitude. Generally, gratitude is based on the fact that I recognize that I've received something. If in this moment in our life we're in a state where if we were to find ourselves in a state where we're not able to survive, we're not able to eat, we're not able to wash ourselves, and someone's there and someone takes care of us and feeds us and washes us, that person should be an object of gratitude. We should feel gratitude towards that person. I think so. So does gratitude have an expiration date? Okay, you helped me, and now 6 months have gone by. No. In the life of each one of us, there was a moment where we were not able to survive alone. I mean, as newborns. And when we were there, completely defenseless, unable to eat alone, to survive, there was someone that took care of us, who fed us. And regardless of whether I remember or not, someone did that for me. And normally it's the mother.
Okay. Quindi,
so at the basis is to feel gratitude towards that person. Thank you. And every once in a while, I mean, there are parents and say, "Oh, Lama, really, I don't want to traumatize my children." And I say, you don't have a choice. Only possibility for a parent for there to not be the traumas between the parents and children is if both the parents and the children are Buddhas. But obviously there are situations where one is projecting one's limitations onto the others. I mean, there are many things you can do to help, but the point here is I allow myself somehow to see what I received. I allow myself to feel gratitude, and it's strange how hard it is sometimes, because we have this kind of inner shortcut that's quite unhealthy. How can I feel gratitude after what he did or what she did to me? Let's remember again, one thing is one thing, another thing is another thing. One thing doesn't take away the other. The fact that my mother saved my life and took cared of me with love, does that take away this, some stupid things that she's done? Is there something along the life, in this case, has it happened that in our lifetime that something our mother has done that has hurt us? Okay, yes, it's true that she did this, but she also did this and that. Okay, no, one thing is one thing, another thing is another thing. And it's fundamental for us to be able to allow ourselves to feel gratitude, because gratitude is another way to connect with other people. And if we go to see, we have this false idea of being autonomous, independent, self-sufficient. Well, where? How? I mean, it would be hard to breathe if it weren't for whales. I always come to this idea. I mean, what do we have to do with whales? So why should we feel gratitude for whales? Imagine that we were in a context where there was no oxygen and someone gave us oxygen. We would feel grateful, wouldn't we? It said, I read this. So I've read two different things. One study says half, another says 2/3 of the oxygen that we breathe is created by the photosynthesis of plankton in the ocean. And there's so many, and you can actually see by satellite all these the plankton close up. They're small, you can't see, but from the satellite pictures you can see. So these plankton, it's said that it's either 50% or 2/3 of the oxygen comes from these small little plants, this plankton in the ocean. Thank you. And these little plants need to live and be nourished, and so they need to be fertilized. So the greatest fertilizer in the ocean is the whale. The whale eats a lot and consequently poops a lot. And there's when it poops, it's not still. The whale is navigating kilometers and kilometers, eating and pooping throughout the ocean. And so what happens is this is the main way to fertilize the plankton. Without whales, most of the plankton would be dead. So when I breathe, is there a connection with the whale or not? Someone say, oh, but the whale doesn't do it with awareness. What does that change? My breath depends on the whale. Just look, when there's when we look at our own microbiome, the billions of beings that live in our so-called body. I mean, how the health of the microbiome is fundamental for us. Our digestion depends a lot on them. If we start looking around, we separate and independent from others, we wouldn't be able to survive. Our state of balance and well-being, physical and mental, depends on other beings. And it's fundamental for us to allow ourselves to see others, look at others, and say thank you. Wow. Wow, look at how much I receive. And if it weren't for others, I wouldn't eat, I wouldn't breathe, I wouldn't be able to digest, and so on and so on. So, thinking that all mothers are in such conditions, I allow myself to connect to other beings. And there are two ways to interpret There's the whole explanation of, like, it's kind of difficult in our times to understand that we say that we've had innumerous lives, and as a consequence, innumerous mothers. So the probability that every being has at some point been our mother, that's an enormous possibility. That's why we say the sentient beings, the mother sentient beings. And there's no expiry date. So a mother of the past should warrant the same gratitude as our mother in our present life. So the point is, we're receiving constantly from everyone, and so we should constantly be feeling gratitude. So to develop bodhicitta, we have the awareness that selfishly speaking, it's better to be altruistic, empathy towards others, that comes by seeing ourselves in others. And we have gratitude.
Okay. If
I recognize this obsession with self-gratification is harmful, and I see that you also have that, I have gratitude towards you. This is the basis for altruism. I just want to add something very briefly. The basis for violence is creating distance between me and the other. If we see a system of, if we see systemic violence, before violence comes, distance is created, or often where one feels superior to others. Just look in crazy situations of wars and genocide. We use these terms of, we dehumanize others. They are not like us. Just look, for example, we live in a society where that's changed a lot, but for a long time there have been different levels of violence towards women, where there was a way to also justify that violence by saying that women were inferior. When we see ourselves in others, it becomes enormously difficult to accept violence towards others. So that's why it's impossible to, it's very, very difficult to accept violence towards someone in our own family or in our own group. What upholds the violence is the separation, where I allow myself to be violent towards you because I don't see myself in you. We are different. On the other side, to avoid violence, to go against violence, we need to allow ourselves to see ourselves in others and generate gratitude again and again. Obviously, this is a lifetime process. It's not from one day to the next. But this second aspect of the path, that's fundamental. As long as I don't open up my heart towards others, I will be trapped in my own selfishness, which is the principle, one of the main causes of suffering. But if you have just look in a family, or here our sangha, or at work among friends, what creates conflict? It's just selfishness. If there's really a place where I see you and you see me, I have my needs, you have yours, I respect you, you respect me, let's find a place of dialogue. It's not that hard. The hardest part is allowing ourselves to see ourselves in others, and saying that I exist, you exist, and we live in a subjective reality. I respect you, you respect me. That's the hard part. But once you have that, finding agreement is not hard. And so when we talk about equality, we don't want everyone to be the same. We want there to be respect and love. And one marvelous symbols and here when you go out of the temple, look towards the center, towards reception. There's a mural with three animals painted. This is the victory of the union of opposites. So impossible becomes possible when opposites unite. So when opposites, they don't create weakness, they create strength when they're able to unite and not go against each other. So on a political system, I mean, it would be the strength of a real democracy where real different points of view helps new ideas come out and define new balances. But if I have to oppose, I have to fight against something, then you can. I mean, not even the possible becomes possible. When the opposites go against each other, even the possible becomes impossible. Instead, when they unite, the impossible becomes possible. And we need to start with this in our everyday life, our relationships with others. So the second fundamental aspect of the path, of this second principal aspect of the path, is we open up our heart to others, starting by recognizing that selfishness is the cause of every suffering of myself and others. I want to go against my selfishness. I open myself up to others. We are afflicted by the same negativities. I connect to the gratitude that I feel for others. And at this point, I generate love. Your happiness is important to me, just like my own. I don't get into a place of duality where if I love you, then I don't love myself. We often live this when you start and get these aspects. We have this attitude where if I do something for me, I feel guilty. When I do something for others, it's a sacrifice. No. When I do something for me, it's also for me, because to be well, I also need to help you. By helping you, I'm also feeling well in a family. If someone takes time for oneself, I mean, that's also good for the other members of the family. I think that everyone should say to the other, take some time for yourself, because if you're well, you help me also be well. So when I do something for myself, it's also for others. And when I do something for others, it's also for me, because your happiness is as important to me as my own. It's like saying, just imagine a mother. When we talk about compassion, we give the example of a mother with an only child. Imagine the mother. Let's imagine that we're a mother, and we're there, and we're very comfortable. Maybe we're getting a massage in a beautiful, relaxed place on the beach. And at a certain point, the person that we love so much, our only child, is out in the sea, drowning. What's more difficult? Letting the child drown while we're getting a massage? or getting up and jumping into the water, even if we don't know how to swim, to try to save the life of our child, what would be more difficult? I think staying relaxed on the beach, because the happiness of my child or my daughter, my son, is as important to me as my own. This is the feeling of a bodhisattva towards everyone, seeing others and not exclude oneself, but include the others. This is fundamental. Don't exclude yourself, but include others. Obviously, none of us can expect to reach this state of total altruism and unconditional love from one day to the next. So let's begin by starting on the 5 categories. Very quickly, let's just look at them. It's not useless, but where we really need to train with bodhicitta is not thinking about the poor, sick children on the other side of the world, which is fine. I don't mean to diminish the suffering of anyone, but we need to begin with the 5 categories: our family,
I nostri amici,
our friends,
le persone che non sono né famiglia
the
né amici,
people that we share space with, but are maybe that we work with or a part of our community. So the first 2 categories, the people we have attraction to. The 3rd category, people we are more neutral to these people, but there is a daily relationships, relationing. And then we have those that people that we have a quote-unquote justifiable aversion to. We have helped them and they have harmed us. And the 5th category is those for whom we have a non-justifiable aversion, like a karmic justification, like I just don't like you and I don't know why. There's no reason. So we should train in these 5 categories. The ones we deal with daily, for whom we have attractions, family and friends, acquaintances of every day, and then those for whom we have aversion. And we need to train here. Of course, we open up our hearts to everyone and try not to be indifferent to other people's suffering. But one fundamental point is opening up our heart. We allow ourselves to see others, allow ourselves to see the suffering of others, the joy of others, and see that we're in the same situation. So from empathy, I see myself in others. I generate empathy. The empathy brings me to feeling love. I want you to be happy. From that, compassion comes. I don't want you to suffer. And from there, altruism comes. I take on myself the responsibility of your happiness, which doesn't mean that I am going to make you happy, but I am going to try to help you to find your happiness. And the conclusion is I need to develop myself, because I can't help you if I am also in a bad way. May I reach Buddhahood, and I'll do everything I can. I will practice generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, wisdom, because I want to help you, because I want to be part of the solution. I want to be able to support all beings. This is the 2nd principal aspect of the path. Are we able to see how altruism and bodhicitta exist as a result of loving oneself? If I don't want to get out of samsara, then I'll never develop the desire to get out of samsara. And if I have a view, a very limited view of suffering for myself, I'll have the same for others. So first I love myself to then be able to love others. And tomorrow we'll look at the correct view of reality where we say, okay, I want to get out of suffering to help others, but it's like saying I want to be I want to be cured from this sickness, but I have this virus. So this virus of ignorance, we need to see it. Because then Lama Tsong Khapa says, without the wisdom realizing ultimate reality, even though you have generated renunciation and bodhicitta, it's not possible to cut the root cause of samsara. Therefore, strive intensely for the method to realize dependent arising. And we'll see this tomorrow. Let's remember that renunciation and bodhicitta, this certainty of the definite emergence and bodhicitta, these are not things that we can develop from one day to the next. These are lifetime objectives that take lifetimes, and that's fine. But if we can have a little bit more love, a little bit more altruism, a little bit more respect and gratitude, and gradually recognize how harmful our selfishness is to ourselves, and see that the fundamental cause of the ills of the world are there, then it's all positive, and we keep walking along this path. So it's time for lunch, and we'll see each other tomorrow to look at the correct view of reality.
Drowe munsel takto ne gyorche kewa kunto yanda lama dang drame cheke pela longche chin sadan lamge yente rabzone dorje change kopa nyurtob sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delekshin Ninsen takto delek pe kuncho sumke chinge lop kuncho sumke ngodrub sol kuncho sumke trashishon.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Con molti segni di buon auspicio. Oma huntam balame sangye rinpoche, kyo balame tamcho rinpoche, drimbalame gendo rinpoche, kiamne kuncho sumla chopa. Buon appetito.
Have a good lunch.